Thanks for sharing your day with us, and a very big day it is. The spy novel plot thickens. CNN is told the FBI has travel records, meeting schedules, and other records suggesting associates of then-candidate Trump worked with Russian operatives on the timing of anti-Clinton disclosures in last year's campaign.
There's so many moving parts here, including the latest news this morning that supposedly there was coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russians, for which I've seen no substantiation. But it continues on and on and on that's the reason why we need a select committee to clear this whole issue up.
And in London, police make anti-terror arrests and Parliament is back to work.
We are not afraid, and our resolve will never waver in the face of terrorism. And we meet here in the oldest of all parliaments because we know that democracy and the values it entails will always prevail.
But we begin and likely will spend most of this hour on a defining day and defining test for the president and the new all-Republican Washington. The House is set to vote later today on a plan to repeal and replace Obamacare. It's priority one for the GOP, and yet the outcome is uncertain.
I don't know why we ought to be rewriting the entire bill just in order to cajole a few people to come along. We ought to go back to the drawing board and come up with free market solutions. Part of being a governing party means putting forward legislation that members of our own party can vote for while maintaining their campaign promises. I'd encourage all within the sound of my voice, all of my friends in the House of Representatives who are perhaps on the fence on this one, just vote no. We'll still get it repealed, but we'll get it actually repealed. If this bill doesn't do that.
Interesting day, to say the least. With us to share their reporting and their insights, The Atlantic's Ron Brownstein, Julie Hirschfeld-Davis of The New York Times, CNN's Dana Bash, and Perry Bacon of 538. President Trump this hour is in a make-or-break meeting, sitting down with House conservatives who, at the moment, are the biggest obstacle to passing that legislation to repeal and replace Obamacare. It is hard to overstate the stakes here. The vote is scheduled for later today. We'll see if it happens, but it's scheduled for later today. And defeat would not only undermine the young Trump presidency, but also the leadership of House Speaker Paul Ryan and his key deputies. Let's go straight to the White House. CNN's Jeff Zeleny standing by. Jeff, the president is in this meeting with these members of the 29-member House Freedom Caucus. He has been trying for the past week plus to get them to sign on. What's going to happen?
He has indeed, John, and this is one of those final meetings. And, of course, it is not open. You know, this is a meeting that he is having privately, but we do have a glimpse of what's happening in there because one of the president's aides sent out a picture showing a standing ovation when the president was walking in. So we don't know if they'll be leaving to a standing ovation, though. The reality here is some of these White House meetings have been very successful in getting people on board, but others have not been. And I am told by advisors here and Republicans I'm talking to on Capitol Hill, we need to keep as much of a focus on the moderates as this House Freedom Caucus, because the more changes that are made to this to sort of bring people on the right is hurting people in the middle, which we've so a bit of confusion here with so many phone calls happening from all the president's top advisors saying slightly different things to different people here. It's one of the reasons they wanted to have them all in the same meeting, in the same room here to discuss all this with the president. But still, even though the vote is scheduled for this evening, expected this evening, other Republicans I'm talking to here and on Capitol Hill say they would not be at all surprised if it was set aside or pushed back. If that happens, of course, that's a sign there is a big problem. John.
That's an understatement to say the least. Jeff Zeleny at the White House. We'll check back as that meeting breaks up, as the lawmakers come out. Let's bring it into the room. The House Speaker Paul Ryan also was supposed to speak to the public this morning, speak to reporters this morning. He's delayed that until this afternoon. Horse trading behind closed doors, wheeling and dealing. I think the very thing the Republicans criticized the Democrats for doing when they passed Obamacare, but we'll put that aside for a second. What does this tell you that if the president is meeting and apparently gets a standing ovation for members of the House Freedom Caucus who at the moment you could make the case are undermining the president on priority number one because they won't accept what he thought was the plan earlier in the week?
They are 100% undermining him. And the question is whether or not they continue to do that to the point where the Republican leadership is forced to cancel the vote. I had a senior Republican on Capitol Hill say to me this morning, the president is now understanding what Republican leaders in the House have been dealing with for the past, 8 years or so.
John Boehner somewhere is sitting and laughing.
Drinking a Merlot, smoking a cigarette, and smoking a cigarette. And that the president, and I'm told that the president is incredibly frustrated. Again, take a number, Mr. President. This is the way Republican leaders have felt for some time. And the reason is because, and we'll see what happens out of this meeting at the White House right now, is because they feel that the House Freedom Caucus is impossible to get to yes, that they keep moving the goalposts, and that they just basically don't want to do this. At the same time, it has been hard for them to look the president in the eye or be on the other end of the cell phone when he keeps calling them saying, I'm going to deny you and deny the Republican leadership the chance to say we kept our promise.
And of course the challenge is even if they get to yes, the process of getting to yes is creating so many more problems in the Senate. I mean, I think the history, since the Republicans took over the House in '95 with Newt Gingrich, Tom DeLay, even John Boehner had the most problems, usually they find a way to get it through the House by moving it to the right, and then they count on the Senate moderates, in essence, to buckle. But this bill is going to be asking an awful lot of the Senate moderates, because I think the biggest argument against it before these latest changes was that it imposed an age tax. It significantly raised premiums and out-of-pocket costs for older working-age adults who are now the core of the Republican coalition. A majority of Donald Trump's votes came from whites over 45. The changes that the Liberty Caucus is demanding make that worse. I mean, kind of would add more out-of-pocket costs for all those, and would also affect women, by no longer having to provide guaranteed maternity benefits. You have to buy them a la carte. They quickly become unaffordable or unavailable. Will Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins, are they going to be willing to vote for that?
The answer is no, I think.
Jeff made a really important point, too, about the moderates in the House. As you move the bill to the right, it becomes a problem on the left. My view is, what I've seen so far is about 30 members are opposed to this, about 15 in the Freedom Caucus, about 15 outside of that. So those people are on the left, and the more changes you make, like Ron talked about in terms of maternity leave and things like that, I think we've seen like 4 or 5 members on the sort of more left side of the party leave the vote, and so they're voting no in the last couple of days. That's where the draining votes are coming from right now.
But the question becomes, what is the president willing to do to get this done? And this is his first test. This is the guy who said, I can do this. I alone. I can cut these deals. And even now, the changes they've made so far, we can put some of them on the screen. Even before today, they had already agreed to add a work requirement, or allow states to add a work requirement on Medicaid. Let states pick block grants instead for the Medicaid funding if they wanted to. Ban new states. Some 30-plus states have already expanded Medicaid under Obamacare. Ban any new states from jumping in there. Repeal the Obamacare taxes more quickly, the taxes that were put in place, and set aside funds for more tax credits, that in part to deal with Ron's question about elderly people. That's what they agreed to do already. Members of the Freedom Caucus want more. They want a more market-based. What they want to do is take out what's called essential health benefits. Again, guaranteed maternity coverage, guaranteed mental health coverage, guaranteed prescription drug coverage, guaranteed emergency services. You look at the list right there. The president promised in the campaign to keep a lot of those things. Is he going to sign off on a House bill? It's only the first step. But to keep the process moving, is he going to sign out, I will support something that violates my promises?
Well, I think at the beginning of the week, the answer was clearly no. The White House knew that the Freedom Caucus wanted these things and basically was telling them, listen, we can't do that for a number of reasons. Procedural reasons, the bill could lose reconciliation protection, but also policy reasons, because he made the promises that you laid out and that he laid out on the campaign trail. He has styled himself the closer. He is the master deal maker. He wants to be able to do this big negotiation and come out with a win, but he doesn't have a lot more he can offer them and still hold to what he said during the campaign. And what's fascinating is that we're on what was supposed to be the day of the vote. This is normally, we've seen these things play out before. It's a lot of horse trading, little small details, rifle shots for different members. But what they are debating here is the fundamental question of whether the federal government should be dictating what kind of insurance benefits people have or not. And that is the fundamental question that lies at the whole root of this debate. They're actually having this debate at the White House hours before the vote.
And the man cutting the deal, or at least the closer, is a non-ideological Republican president who promised many things during the campaign that gives conservatives fits. The question is he willing to change? Now, you spent a lot of time on Capitol Hill and how these things go. I mean, the idea is, if Paul Ryan has to pull this bill today, what does that say? And for those of you at home, apologies for Washington speak, but they're trying to do this under a process called reconciliation. The reason they can't do everything in this one big bill is that the Senate rules, they believe, won't allow that. So the House is trying to do part of this. What does it say for the Speaker if he has to, as Speaker Boehner did before him, before he grows so frustrated he just said he was leaving, has to pull this?
It's very, very bad for his leadership. It's very bad, again, not just for the president, but for Paul Ryan. There's no question about it.
Is it bad also for tax reform and for everything else down the road?
Well, I was just going to say, let's just also say that it is entirely possible that that is going to happen, that he is going to have to pull the bill unless the president can seal some kind of deal with this block of Freedom Caucus members who are there right now. But what does that mean? You know, let's just sort of take this hypothetical down the road here. If he has to pull the bill, it is probable that they'll turn to tax reform. And I actually think something like tax reform could be more of a consensus builder for Republicans. Could be.
You got one big exception, though. The import adjustment.
Well,
they could have the
no
same
question.
dynamic between the House and the Senate.
They could. No question. They could. But it's not as personal for these constituents. I mean, healthcare is about as personal as it gets when you talk about legislation that affects me, that affects people's constituents.
I think one thing I was curious about, would the Freedom Caucus be team players once Obama was out of the presidency? And it sounds like they're behaving the exact same way they were before. And that's an important significant event in every...
The question is the model they're establishing. If the price of getting it out of the House is adding provisions that make it almost impossible to pass the Senate, even if they do pass it in the next several days, have they created a precedent that is valuable or damaging on those other legislative priorities?
Can I just answer your question just in one other way as well about Paul Ryan's leadership? There already has been a lot of second guessing about the way he approached this from the beginning. Basically, for a lot of conservatives, he compromised and negotiated with himself. That this has already been too moderate. That he should have, knowing the Freedom Caucus, knowing the way that his Republicans are, started further to the right, knowing that when he gets to the Senate, it's going to have to be moderated, and ultimately even more so, and that many members of the Freedom Caucus understand that they're already starting, from their perspective, way too far to the middle.
Worth noting, the bill too far to the middle, the Congressional Budget Office said would remove health insurance for 24 million people. And, you know, they may vote before having a final estimate on this bill, which unlikely would be even higher and presumably would have even higher out-of-pocket costs for those older working-age adults. And again, it's worth noting, a majority of Donald Trump's votes came from whites over 45. Three-quarters of all people in the country over 45 are white. These are Republican voters who would be the big losers in this kind of shift of risk and cost that is inherent in the deregulation in this bill.
We'll come back to this later in the program. We're keeping an eye on that meeting at the White House. We should say, as the president is in this meeting, someone else apparently has his phone, or else he's taking a break. He just tweeted out, we're going to pass, honored the victims, and preached a message of defiance.
Yesterday, an act of terrorism tried to silence our democracy. But today we meet as normal, as generations have done before us and as future generations will continue to do, to deliver a simple message: we are not afraid.
We're also learning ISIS now claiming that one of its, quote, soldiers is responsible for the rampage. Nick Payton-Walsh is live in London at the scene of the deadly attack. Nick, police have just identified the suspect. What do we know about him?
His name is Khalid Massoud, according to Scotland Yard, London's police force, and he appears to be a man aged 52 who lived in the West Midlands. That's where a lot of the focus of their arrests were, a town called Birmingham, key city here in the United Kingdom, and also a man with a record of, frankly, petty crime, of violence, which may perhaps explain some of the idiotically violent rampage that began here just over 24 hours ago when he took a car he'd rented up onto the pavement here, a Hyundai, and ploughed into about 40 people who received injuries. And it's here that two of his three victims lost their lives. One of them, Kurt Cochran, a man from Utah. Here, can you believe it, on his 25th wedding anniversary on holiday with his wife Melissa. She's now in hospital with a broken rib, leg and injuries to her face. One tragic loss of life there, which President Trump has called the loss of a great American. And also another individual, a Spanish teacher, aged 43, Aisha Frade. She too died here. The car then continued on down this road past what you can just about see as a police line, obscured now by what also was here just over 24 hours ago, a large collection of tourists, people just coming to see this Big Ben, a key London landmark attached to the heart of the British democracy here and government here, the Houses of Parliament. Now, this is a scene where life will be permanently altered, frankly, for those who come past here on the way to work as part of an everyday routine, but also today too, as life gets back to normal. Tourists, some of them oblivious it seems to what happened here just 24 hours ago, but the car continued down the road 24 hours ago into the railings, and then the attacker jumped out, went round the corner, tried, it seems, to get in. Khalid Masood tried to get in to the courtyard of Parliament and then stabbed to death PC Keith Palmer, a man who gave his life trying to defend the Houses of Parliament here. ISIS claiming responsibility, but as often we have no idea if they had any prior knowledge at all, or just trying to append their branding to this sick crime. John.
Nick Payton-Walsh for us live on the scene in London. Nick, thanks very much for that. Let's bring the conversation back here. Tell me if you were struck, as I was, by the demeanor of our president yesterday, President Trump, who in the past, whether it is San Bernardino or Orlando or Nice or Brussels, has sent out tweets essentially saying, I told you so, we need to get tough, we need to be tougher. Very reserved yesterday, sent out a tweet. I spoke to the UK Prime Minister Theresa May today to offer condolences on the terrorist attack in London. She is strong and doing very well. The president being very measured there, and we're told by sources that after a conversation with his new national security advisor, H.R. McMaster, who briefed him on what they knew and apparently gave him a message, Mr. President, at this moment, let's try to keep it calm, don't put things out there. It was different, yes?
It was striking. I mean, he was very quiet yesterday. The White House did put out a readout of his call with Theresa May, but he was actually just beginning a meeting when they got news of the attack, and he made a very glancing reference to it, some news out of London, you know, and did not take the opportunity to talk about radical Islamic terrorism, or this is why we need to get tough, or this is why we need my travel ban. It was very muted, and when we learned later that he's been talking to his national security advisor about this, I think that's probably the reason why. They also hadn't learned a whole hell of a lot by the time he was.
But that hasn't stopped him before.
Yeah.
That has not stopped him before, and that's a striking contrast. I mean, I do think
that look felt like a tweet that may have been written by someone else, you know, the staff. I mean, it may have felt like a staff tweet as opposed to the tap with two Ps from the president himself in the middle of the night. But look, I agree. I mean, I think this was a more restrained, and you know, we're probably going to see a presidency that kind of goes back and forth in those. And anytime you think you have turned the corner and you have a restrained Donald Trump as president, you know, a few hours later you'll have something else.
His son. Acted differently.
Right.
Donald Trump Jr. tweeting an old article from the London mayor, a Muslim, from September 22, 2016, in which the mayor said, if you live in a big urban area, you're going to have to deal with these things sometimes. Donald Trump tweeting out, you have to be kidding me. And the headline of the story was, terror attacks are part of living in a big city, says London mayor. The mayor has said, I've got more important things to do than respond to Donald Trump Jr.
Two things. First of all, he quoted the mayor out of context. If you look at what the mayor actually said, he did not say that the way Donald Trump Jr. said. Secondly, we know on day one, Donald Trump, the president, behaved differently. But I would be curious, when the Muslim ban conversation comes back, does he start invoking London again? The way, remember, the Muslim ban kind of grew out of the French attacks in the first place. That was his justification. So I'll be curious, day one he behaved in a traditional way, like Obama might have. I'll be curious if we're talking about the Muslim ban, he's defending it, he's on stage somewhere next week, if he invokes London in a way that the British and a lot of other people do not support.
He is somebody who generally, you know, just likes to tweet about things that he sees, and obviously we've seen, just going back in his Twitter feed way before he was a candidate, some of the really bizarre things that he decided that he wanted to comment on. But with regard to yesterday, I'm not saying that he hasn't learned a lesson and he's not going to be presidential on big moments like this, but he also was a little bit distracted with, you know, trying to say that he was vindicated, which he was not, by the House Intelligence Chair, and trying to get his first important, critical piece of legislation passed.
To Donald Trump Jr., I would say maybe focus on the business and stay out of politics. Maybe?
International relations.
International relations.
Throw that in, yeah.
Everybody sit tight, please. Up next, new CNN reporting on the FBI's Russia election meddling probe. And the president says his Obama wiretap allegation has been, as Dana noted, somewhat vindicated. Is that right?
Choose to go, to indulge your curiosity. Explore a new road to see where it takes you. Meet the leaders who change the game. No matter where you are, no matter what the currency, when you run the numbers.
Coordination between the Trump campaign and the Russians, or he is going to act as a surrogate of the White House because he cannot do both.
More on that wrinkle and the fallout in just a moment. First, though, important new CNN reporting on what the FBI director this week confirmed is an investigation into the possibility associates of then-candidate Donald Trump coordinated with Russian operatives last year, just as the Kremlin leaked hacked emails from the Democratic National Committee and from Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman. Several sources familiar with the investigation tell CNN the FBI has not concluded there was collusion, but has gathered evidence suggesting such coordination may have taken place. CNN Justice correspondent Evan Perez helped break this story. He joins us now to lay this out. Evan, let's just start with this. What information do investigators have that make them believe there may have been some collusion or coordination, as the FBI director put it in his public testimony this week?
Well, John, U.S. officials tell CNN that the FBI has information that includes human intelligence, travel, business, and phone records, and accounts of in-person meetings, that this information is raising the suspicions of the FBI counterintelligence investigators. Now, one law enforcement official said that the information in hand suggests, quote, people connected to the campaign were in contact, and it appeared that they were giving the thumbs up to release information when it was ready. That said, there were other officials that we've spoke to who said that it's premature to draw that inference from the information that's been gathered so far, since it's largely circumstantial. The bottom line is that the FBI cannot yet prove that collusion actually took place, but the information suggesting collusion is now the focus of this investigation. I should note that the FBI would not comment for this story, nor would the White House. Trump officials have denied that there's any evidence of collusion, John.
That they have, and we should make that clear. They have denied any collusion. They have said at the end of this investigation they will be proven right. Do we know, Evan, at this moment, who is being investigated?
Well, we don't know exactly who is connected to, who's connected to Trump that is being investigated for possible coordination, but we do know that the FBI has already been investigating at least four former Trump campaign associates, Michael Flynn, Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, and Carter Page, for contacts with Russians that are known to U.S. intelligence. Now, all four of these men have denied improper contacts, and one of the interesting things here is that the FBI is running into some obstacles in trying to find any conclusive intelligence that communications between Trump's associates and Russians was meant for coordination. Some of that communication that the FBI knew about has ceased in recent months, given the public focus on Russia's ties to the Trump campaign. And also, some of the officials that the FBI was keeping an eye on have changed their methods of communications, making it that much more difficult for the FBI investigators, John.
Evan Perez, fabulous reporting by you and your colleagues. Also an indication this one's going to go on for a while. Let's come back into the room. Let's start on that point. That was pretty clear from the FBI director's public testimony that he even admitted and acknowledged the investigation. He was very specific. The investigation included possible, underline, possible coordination was the word he used, that if you're a new president and you were hoping this was going to go away quickly, no.
The quote from the law enforcement official that Evan reported was the finish line, I think, in the worst case scenario for Republicans as this story has to develop. They're not there yet, obviously. As he said, they have not yet proven this. But the fact that they feel they have enough evidence that someone with knowledge said something that strong about circumstantial evidence, or even more than, as Adam Schiff said, more than circumstantial evidence, pointing to collusion. You know, we're talking about the stakes potentially raising very rapidly, very quickly. One other point, in other scandals, at least in my adult lifetime in Washington, things often move forward when individuals begin to face possible legal jeopardy, and they have to make choices about what they are going to say, either in congressional testimony or to federal investigators. And the fact that there are specific individuals that they were citing as being the areas of focus of this investigation means that things could happen potentially to move this forward more rapidly than seems possible.
And as this plays out, the FBI investigation, which, as you could tell by Evan's choice of words, they were being very careful about what we know and what we don't know. The FBI clearly has evidence, travel records, as he noted, other documents, phone calls, scheduled meetings and the like that lead them to believe this is something they need to explore. As that plays out, we don't know how long it will take. The FBI director was quite clear. I don't know how long this is going to take. We have both on the House and the Senate side Intelligence Committee investigations, and the head of the House Intelligence Committee caused a bit of a stir yesterday. Devin Nunes said that he reviewed some intelligence that showed him that members of the Trump transition team were under some form of surveillance. He said it was incidental, meaning that somebody was legally under surveillance, had a conversation with members of the Trump transition. He would not be much more specific than that, except Devin Nunes said that he believed that it had nothing to do with Russia, nothing to do with the issue under investigation by his committee at the moment. Today he came out from a meeting. The Democrats were mad about this. Devin Nunes took that information, talked to reporters, then he went to the President of the United States and briefed him on that information before he talked to any other members of the committee, Republicans and the ranking Democrat. Devin Nunes emerged from a meeting this morning saying that that was his judgment call.
It was a judgment call on my part, and that's at the end of the day, that's, sometimes you make the right decision, sometimes you make the wrong one, but you got to stick by the decisions you make.
And here, before we jump into the politics of this and the fascinating part of this, here's what he said yesterday. Remember, he's the chairman of what is supposed to be an independent investigation of possible inappropriate activity by associates of the President of the United States. That's what they're investigating. Here's what why he said he went to the White House.
Because what I saw has nothing to do with Russia and nothing to do with the Russia investigation, has everything to do with possible surveillance activities, and the President needs to know that these intelligence reports are out there, and I have a duty to tell him that.
Does he have a duty to tell him that?
He doesn't. That's actually not his job at all. The duty when it comes to the President is from the intelligence community. Now the CIA director, the director of intelligence, and so forth. What the duty of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees is oversight of those communities. It is not to be the person to keep the President informed. He's got an entire intelligence apparatus to do that. One thing I just want to add to the reporting here is that now he's saying he made a judgment call. I am told that before he went out to do his initial press conference, first he talked to reporters on the Hill, then he went to brief the President, then he came out and talked in that clip you just showed, that he was actually very upset, steaming mad about whatever it is that he said he saw or was told about. And that at the time, there were members of the committee, Republican members of the committee, trying to calm him down, saying a couple things. One is, don't go out and do a press conference about this. This is going to throw the entire investigation about Russia, in the garbage, basically. And two, don't you want to talk to Adam Schiff, the top Democrat, before you go do this? And he was so mad, he said no. And one of the reasons, I'm told by a source familiar with this meeting, is because he said, well, Adam Schiff at the hearing on Monday, where they had James Comey, had a 15-minute monologue trying to connect dots that weren't there, and he was upset about that. But it's pretty clear in what he said today that he realizes, now that he's calm, that he probably should have heeded the advice of those Republicans
why
telling
your mother
him to
told you to
stop.
count to 10.
Exactly.
One of the reasons for that is not only is this not his role as the Intelligence Committee chairman, but particularly when this investigation is going on. The fact that he came out and did this now taints the investigation, which is what Adam Schiff came out and said. And so it only amplifies those calls for an independent investigation, a select committee, or even a committee outside of Congress to really look more deeply into this. And that is something that President Trump doesn't want. And so to the degree, if Devin Nunes thought that this was going to help the President by refuting some of what's been out there, I think it's only done the opposite.
Right. He has a legitimate concern that he believes the intelligence community is too quick to quote-unquote unmask people. That if you speak to somebody overseas who's being monitored and you get caught up in that your name should not be put in intelligence reports and moved around if you didn't do anything wrong. He has a legitimate concern about that. But by running to the President, he looks like a partisan. He looks like a defender of the President, not an independent chairman of an important investigation.
And apparently no one else has yet seen the actual evidence.
Right.
And
Republicans or Democrats.
Either side. And Adam Schiff, in his statement yesterday, contradicted what the chairman said. And he said, in fact, that people were not unmasked, but it was possible to tell who they were from the descriptions. So there's a lot that we don't know, and more importantly, that members of the Intelligence Committee don't know. But I think Julie's right. I mean, the biggest point is that investigation has now been, I think, permanently clouded, and does raise the question, if the Senate Intelligence Committee is not able to kind of credibly do this, then who will be able to?
The FBI.
The FBI.
Well, the FBI, but if you go back to past investigations, these are not apples and apples, at least not yet, but you have the law enforcement investigations continue there, and then the congressional investigations are usually to sort of inform the American people. The criminal investigations or the law enforcement investigations deal with were there crimes committed, and the congressional investigations deal with what can we filter through the classification process and inform the American people in a democracy about what happened. If those are compromised, then Democrats will keep saying, let's have an independent investigation.
I think John McCain said the two today, so it's not just Democrats at this point. I think we're getting a little bit beyond.
Right, select committee. We'll see that John McCain is a lonely voice still on that issue, but we'll see how this one plays out. Next, let's make a deal. The President trying as we speak to win the votes necessary to get a big health care bill through the House, but are the concessions dooming its chances? The President at this hour meeting with a group of House conservatives who are a giant obstacle to his #1 legislative priority, repealing and replacing Obamacare. The President in that private closed meeting trying to cut the deal to get the votes necessary to get the legislation through the House today. That would be step one. It would then have to go to the Senate. Before this private meeting, the president taking to his favorite medium, Twitter, this morning to send a video out hoping his supporters will pick up the phone and help him get the votes.
You were told that you could keep your plan and keep your doctor. You were given many, many false stories. The fact is you were given many lies. Go with our plan. It's going to be terrific. You're going to be very, very happy. Call your local representative, call your senator, let them know that you're behind our plan.
It's an interesting test. We have not seen the president, both the inside and the outside game. He's in the room right now trying to twist arms and get a deal. Also, the question is, how much will he give? How much can members are also learning how much can we get out of him, right? And then there's the outside game. Can he get his supporters to pick up the phone? To call these members and say, hey, be with the president.
A lot of Republicans who have come out this week as no's on this bill have cited the fact that I'm getting 400 calls no for every 2 calls yes. They know that their constituents do not feel good about this bill, and that's why it's losing support. And somebody at the White House has obviously told the president that it's important that these members hear not just from you that they need to vote for it, but also from their constituents, because he did go to the Hill and have this, and sort of threaten them earlier this week and say, it's your political hides on the line here if this thing goes down. This is a way of demonstrating that. Right?
You know what's so Stranger Things upside down about all this is that the members that are giving him the most trouble are the ones that he theoretically has the most leverage over. I mean, the Freedom Caucus are from districts where he was strongest. If you look at the polling that's out today from Quinnipiac University, it's really the people on the other side of the caucus that should be the most. 23 House Republicans in district that Hillary Clinton carried, looking at a bill that, according to Quinnipiac today, 17% of college whites, 18% of millennials, and 10% of non-whites support, and among independents, and by the way, among the 50 to 64-year-old age group in the poll, which is the group most in the crosshairs of the insurance changes, 62% opposition. So, yes, the focus on the Freedom Caucus and their concerns is obviously front and center, but you do have to wonder how far many of these more moderate members will go, given the kind of reaction to this bill among the voters prominent in their districts.
Yeah, and the president's trying to get it over hurdle number 1. Then there would be hurdle number 2 in the Senate, and then hurdle number 3, getting the Senate and the House to come together. As he does so, you make a point that a lot of people don't like this bill. They may not know a lot about it, but they know it's going to change something and rip the floor out from under them. They don't like it. The president's own standing in that Quinnipiac poll, 37% approval, 56% disapprove. But among Republicans, this is interesting. Among Republicans, he is at 81% support among Republicans. That's good, but it's down from 91% 2 weeks ago. So if you're the president and you didn't win the popular vote and you know your coalition is to keep your base together, if you're Donald Trump and his political team, you've got to be looking at that number and saying, whoa, we need a win.
They need to win big time, and more importantly, they can't afford a lose, and a lose of such monumental proportion as the key promise that swept Republicans into the majority in the House, starting back in the Tea Party, fight of 2010, and then on and on and on till the White House now. I mean, obviously there were lots of other factors, but the promise to do this was front and center. The problem is that you have, as we were talking about, the Freedom Caucus, who are in the White House right now. Then you have Ileana Ros-Lehtinen from South Florida. I saw her yesterday. Any chance that you can change? No. She said the only regret that she has is that she can only vote no once because she's so much opposed to this. Because she's hearing it from her constituents.
Isn't the complication here, though? Obviously, losing would be devastating. There's something they promised for so long. But this is so winning has its own problems because in substance this is so against the brand that he has established that he is not a different kind of Republican. He's going to protect programs that protect older working age adults. To put out a budget and say we're going to exempt Medicare and Social Security from any cuts, focus all of the cuts on domestic discretionary programs, and then to come back with a health care bill 4 or 5 days later that hammers basically the same people that you say you are protecting and in fact are protecting in your budget. How does that add up? I mean, this bill is like kind of more of a, in the end, more of a Ryan House Republican small government uber alles than the kind of Bannon-esque redesign of the party.
So usually in a first-year president gets something done. Clinton, 93, got the budget done. Bush got the tax cuts done. Obama got the stimulus done. You have a president here who has low approval ratings, 1, and he is selling a bill that's really unpopular among everybody, 2. So those 2 things combined make it hard. If he was popular, he could sell something. If it was popular itself, he could sell it. But those 2 combined make it really hard to get this done.
The Republican Party has changed a lot in the last 10 years. We've had 8-year Democratic presidency. This is the first chance they've had to govern, and they have a non-ideological Republican president. They have a big family anyway on Capitol Hill. Then they have an unpredictable president. Stay tuned. We'll see if they have this vote today. Up next, President Trump speaking out to Time magazine, defending his own credibility by saying, even if it doesn't back up by the facts, I'm president. But who needs the dictionary when we have President Trump? In a remarkable interview with Time on the subject of truth-telling, the president stands by some of his greatest hits or greatest misses, like Muslims celebrating in New Jersey on 9/11, or 3 million or more illegal votes for Hillary Clinton this past November. And he suggests you skip the fact check because, quote, I can't be doing so badly because I'm president and you're not. That is one indisputable fact. He is president. You are not. As for the rest of the interview, well, good luck finding facts. The Washington Post fact checker detailed 14 statements made by the president in the Time interview that were demonstrably false. And again, this was a conversation about truth-telling. Its highest or lowest award was bestowed. That would be 4 Pinocchios. But remember, he's the president and you're not. You have to, folks, go on. I mean, everyone here has read it. If anyone at home, please go online and read it.
Can we just, before we talk about the substance, talk about yet another example of the president being obsessed with Saturday Night Live? from a generation or two ago, right. Chevy Chase. I'm Chevy Chase.
Just a generation.
Okay, sorry. Carry on.
You know, I'm going to name check 2 of your colleagues. I remember a classic Tom Friedman, Maureen Dowd, New York Times Magazine cover story 25 years ago about the contentious Jim Baker, George H.W. Bush relationship. And if I remember correctly, they quoted George H.W. Bush as saying, if you're so smart, how come I'm president? So it may be something that infects once you get into the Oval Office.
It's part of the briefing on day one?
It's part of the briefing on day one, absolutely.
You know, we can laugh about it, and this was a remarkable interview in a lot of ways. But the thing that strikes me about this is that this idea of I'm president and this enables me to say basically whatever I want to say. This lies, I think, at the heart of the credibility issue for Mr. Trump, because his view is for all of these months on the campaign trail, he would say things that were demonstrably false, and we would do fact checks, and he would say them again. And unlike other candidates, he would not back down from things when it was demonstrated that they were false. And he kept on winning primaries, and then he won the general election. And I do think that there's a core sense that he has that it means that people don't care if it's true or not. They just want to hear me own what I think, and he talked about himself as an instinctual person, and that's what people like about me, and he has no apology for that.
I'm an instinctual person, but my instinct turns out to be right, he says.
I'm amazed in a week like this that Donald J. Trump did an interview with Time Magazine about truth-telling. What message was that? What do you think that was he was get out of that? Was he going to prove to Time Magazine that he's right and they're wrong? It was a very strange decision. I mean, he could have spent the time calling members or something.
He knew he was going to be on the cover, and he wanted, so therefore he wanted to be in the story, and he wanted to say he has the record for covers, except...
Again, SNL, like Time Magazine, and frankly, like us, and yours, the New York Times.
But to Julie's point, I mean, there are a lot of elements of his agenda that are pretty controversial right now, but you would have to say the reason he's so much lower than any president in public opinion at this point in his presidency is mostly about personal characteristics. 60% of that Quinnipiac poll said he was not honest. He's like passing his former opponent in the campaign.
He's president.
I understand.
Or not. Gotta go. Gotta go.
Never mind.
Go. That's it for Inside Politics. Want to tell you we're keeping an eye. The White House briefing is up next hour. We're also waiting for those conservatives to come out of that